Instructional Designers in Offices Drinking Coffee is brought to you by Domino, makers of Domino One, the all-in-one, cloud-based e-learning authoring tool for teams. You can learn more at domino.com. That's DOMINKNOW.com. Now, here's this week's episode.
Good morning.
Oh!
It's another idiotic.
It is, and it feels like it's been so long because we of course had to miss last week due to scheduling challenges, and it just dawned on me I didn't get to hear that theme song last week, so you know, it warms my heart.
It does. Speaking of warming hearts, we're getting a lot of weather updates in the chat.
Yes, this is where Canada and parts of the U.S. become very divergent in our experiences. I have a light snowfall happening. It's not quite snow globy, but it could get there today. Very holiday-esque for those of us who are in the Christmas holiday mode. That said, other places joining us here today, we've gotten some nice reports of different places. A bit of rain was thrown in there. Jennifer's telling us that it's not surprisingly chilly in Winnipeg. And the truth is, everybody in Canada knows that Winnipeg's real name is Winterpeg. That's what everybody refers to it as. David just tossed that in. So great minds think alike, maybe. Anyway.
Everybody.
Yeah. So Brent, how are you in Arizona? You mentioned in the chat it's finally cold. So tell me what cold is, because
David, it just started becoming under 70. So yeah, it's quite chilly.
So you'll get the skates out any day now and be ready for the pond to freeze over. Yeah. Oh, and folks, we have Myra Rodan joining us today, and Myra's in
Good
Vegas.
morning, everyone. Yes, I'm in Vegas.
What's the Vegas weather?
It is chilly. So it is now 48 degrees Fahrenheit, which is what is that? 8 degrees Celsius, right?
Yeah, it's somewhere around the tens mark, maybe. So around 10.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I should be able to convert things into Celsius. Like, I'm from Puerto Rico, we use metric.
I only have
like
a few reference points, like room temperature is here and freezing is here. And then after that, I just kind of guesstimate, because you can't really do the math in your head totally. So, Myra, you've been with us, a number of times on Idiotic before, but there may be some folks who haven't met you yet here with us. So give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself to get us started.
Yeah. So let's see, it's been a while since I've been on with you guys. So Myra Roldan, I am a technical program manager at AWS, Amazon Web Services, which is a division of the greater Amazon. We're the technical side of Amazon, not the retail. So I cannot help you with your packages. Unlike many people believe when their packages don't arrive, and I get emails and messages from my family members asking me to check on their package. Not my area of expertise. I have been in the whole L&D space, the learning space, for about 20 years now. So I'm dating myself a little. I don't know. I've worked with a lot of Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies. I've done a lot of things. And for those of you who don't know, my area of focus is emerging technologies, but I also do research around labor market demand and jobs. So that's kind of my areas where I tend to work in, and the labor market and competency building is kind of my bread and butter.
And every time you've joined us, we've talked about something that's been the breadth of different things that you've ended up bringing to us is always it's always incredible. It always feels like you've got your fingers, in so many different pies, checking different things out. It's brilliant. Today, we're talking about a game which is completely different from any other time that you've been with us before. So maybe just start out by telling us, what is the LearnCoin game, and give us a bit of a background on that, and we'll get started.
Yeah, definitely. So the name of the game has evolved, and I came up with a jingle last night based on, we did some play testing.
Hey, you didn't sing the jingle for us last night.
You inspired me afterwards. So I tortured Brent. He play tested my game, and I'm doing like actual play testing, which is where I have people kind of join and play the game. So this whole game is about blockchain. And it's the objective of the game is to actually help people understand, how does blockchain work? Because a lot of people, it's so abstract for people, and it's hard to, like, you can watch videos that tell you can learn, what did you say last night? You can learn blockchain in 3 minutes, right? And you're like, I still don't know what it is. You watch the video and you're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's tons of YouTubes out there on learn it in 30 seconds. Check out this animation.
Yeah. So because I have this methodology that I developed with my team called the CRAP method. So I'm using the CRAP method when it comes to teaching people how blockchain works. So I developed this game originally for ATD/TK 2022, which is in January, and we're going to be playing my game. But this is also going to become a physical game, a tabletop game that people will be able to purchase and use it. Either it's going to be, I'm really seeing my audience is going to be more academic, like school, middle school through colleges. So because there is some light math, right, Brent?
Very light, very light.
There's some light math because we have to hash. So this is where my jingle comes in. So I'm a big fan of The Clash.
Nice.
And Rocking the Casbah.
Oh yeah.
One of my favorite songs by The Clash. So I was rethinking the name of the game because initially it was going to be LearnCoin, but that isn't catchy enough. So I'm thinking I'm going to call it Hashing the Blockchain. And as I was thinking of the name last night, Rocking the Casbah came into my head, to my mind, because we're like, we're gonna mine the blockchain. We're gonna hash. Yeah, we're gonna mine the blockchain, hashing the blockchain kind of deal.
Oh, come on, sing it. Let's go.
No. I need the whole lyrics. Like, this is all in my head. I will definitely have a jingle out for you guys. I got to bring my ukulele out and try to make a jingle. So,
big Clash fan here as well.
Yes.
And then now, of course, Rock the Casbah is going to be in my brain all day for the rest.
I know. I'm sorry. Sorry.
It's good.
Sorry.
It's good. It's a good place to be. It's replacing some of the Christmas melodies that were foisted upon me on the radio this morning. So
now you will also be thinking about hashing the blockchain.
I'd be waiting for the jingle. Yeah, I'm waiting for the single to drop. Myra dropping the big single. Oh, awesome. So how did you? Where did you get started with this? What was the did you just look at it and say people need to know about the blockchain, or was there something else that kind of brought you to even thinking about a game initially?
Yeah, so I've been kind of playing in the crypto market since like the early 2012s, where I invested some money in crypto. I really didn't understand it at that point. So I was like, oh, there's this thing called crypto and you use it in the dark web to buy shit. So I invested $100 in this crypto, and you get a public key and a private key, which is like your identification. So then you have access to your funds. And because I knew little about crypto, and so I wrote my keys down on a piece of paper that I lost. So guys, I am a crypto millionaire. I just don't have access to my money right now because I can't find my keys. Yeah, so it's as I've seen this whole idea of crypto evolving. And we now see full countries adopting cryptocurrency as their monetary value, right? We're also going to start seeing blockchain being used for other things. So right now, a lot of you may have heard of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and may not understand what that is, right? Or like, what's the point of it? But we're going to start seeing physical things have NFT value also. They're going to be turned into NFTs, which makes it very unique. And we'll see things like diplomas and certificates and any type of credentials being backed by blockchain, which brings us to like, what the heck is blockchain, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not the only one asking that question. So,
we talked about this a little bit last night. There's probably not a snowball's chance in heck we're going to be able to explain all of the details of blockchain in 45 minutes or less. But the really important part is the game aspect of it, right? And that's I know everybody's really excited about learning about blockchain, probably, and we'll probably talk a little bit about that, but. Let's start with the game. Let's start so we know how the game kind of came about. So how did you start to tackle it as an instructional designer, as somebody that's in L&D? Like, you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to make a game. I'm going to go for it. Then what?
Yeah, so it all started during ATD ICE in Salt Lake City this year. I had submitted a proposal for a blockchain session, and it got approved. I know. And Destry Hildenbrand, for you, he is a big AR guy, augmented reality. He was so beside himself and excited about the potential behind blockchain. Sorry, I have a little one here. The potential of blockchain, that I was like, okay, I have to make this very tangible, so everyone else can get as excited as Destry about this, right? And so I was like, I'm going to make a game. And so, just for context for you guys, blockchain is just a digital ledger that stores data in discrete blocks. So it's just a storage place for data, right? That's all blockchain is. And so I was trying to explain this to Destry, and he's like, yeah, we could do like NFTs and we could do all this other stuff. And this is where Myra coin came up. So I was like, okay, Destry, I'm going to like sit down and formalize this, because it cannot be just me presenting like, I'm going to tell you about blockchain today, guys, right? Like, and because I have this CRAP method, and CRAP is for like concrete, representation, abstraction, and then practice. So with concrete, the game just throws you into blockchain. And let me share my screen really quick.
Yep.
Let me get the rules out of the place. And let me do this. Okay. So this is what we played last night, is what I'm going to be sharing. I'm going to minimize this. Let me move our picture back. So on the here on the screen, I'm going to minimize my. Okay, so here on the screen, these are the components of the play test that we did last night. So this is a digital version of the game. The game is going to be a printed version, but for prototyping, it's really expensive to prototype a physical game. So I decided to use Mural to create a digital version of the game that I could test the mechanics of and test the gameplay. So there's a lot of components here. This ledger over here is part of the game. And basically, what happens here is each player has a wallet, as you can see here. And let me see if I can make this bigger so we can look at a wallet. So each player has a wallet, and each player gets tokens and these NFTs. And then they have their own ledger, which is this screen here. And then in the middle of the board game, there's these transaction cards, and then there's a network. The network is like that blockchain network where all the coins go and all of the blocks are held. So going back here, so the gameplay begins with everyone pulling in clockwise a card, and these are transaction cards. And you just do what the card says. So like this one is attend a psychic reading mobile course, pay 3 coins to the player on the right. So, you know, whoever pulled this card has to transfer 3 coins to the player on the right. And everyone adds the transaction. Let me pull up your here, this is a completed one. Everyone adds the transaction name, value, and the wallet ID to their ledger. After we complete the 5 rounds, we then go into a mining round. And I'm going to make this bigger here because this is where everyone got caught up and where everyone got really competitive also.
I lost, by the way.
Okay, and I was told that I need to really inform you guys that Betty Danowitz won. She wanted to make sure that I told you guys that. So Brian Washburn, Betty Danowitz, Destry, Brent, and I all played last night. So once you get the transactions in, then you have to, the mining round is about solving a puzzle. And this is where in blockchain, there's actors and there's miners. So we start off the game as actors and then we put on our mining hat. And with mining, you're solving a puzzle and you're creating a hash algorithm. So a hash, which is like an encryption of a transaction, and it's added to a block within a blockchain. So everyone here then has to start mining. And what you do is like a nonce is a number used only once. And in this instance, this is supposed to be 9 here. Let me fix this because this threw Betty off because I didn't fix hers. But you pick a number used only once, any number between 1 and 9. And then you have to enter the last 3 digits from the previous hash. So this is the previous hash in this instance. This is the previous hash here. And then the name value. So the first letter of the transaction name, you decode it over here. And then the value, which is the same value because it's numerical. And then the node value, you got to convert that C to a number. And then it strings all the numbers together here. And it needs to make sure that it's divisible by 3. So let me just show you guys something. So if I change this to 3 here, you'll notice that it turns red. So that means that this hash is not divisible by 3. And so this player would have to keep on guessing like what numbers, kind of using numbers until they get a green signal there, letting them know that they solved it correctly. Then they can move on to the next puzzle. This is a very simplified version of a hashing algorithm. This picking out these digits here and then making sure it's divisible by 3. This is part of what computers do on a regular basis. So this is the basic premise of the game. Once all of the hashes are solved for the transactions, the player who solved it first calls hash, and then everyone has to verify that they did it right. So we had an incident with Brian Washburn, who did not use he called hash first, but did not have the correct last 3 of the previous hashes. So he lost that turn because he didn't solve it correctly. But it's about consensus. So we all verified his work. We found the error. So then we move on and we keep on trying to solve. And then the person who solves it correctly and we all verified it, then we create this final blockchain hash that is the last 2 digits of the winner, which was Betty, that's her node number, and then the last 2 digits of each of the transactions to create a hash for the actual blockchain. So that's a lot. But, I think once we started the gameplay, and let me see if I can find you guys again, stop sharing here. Once we started the gameplay and everyone got through that initial round, I think we could have gone a few more rounds. What do you think?
I totally think we could have. Yeah, it's like most games that I learned to play for the first time, that first round is always tough, right? It's slow and everyone's asking questions and trying to figure out. That's where all the learning happens, right? And then everybody kind of has their own aha moments. And then you kick it into high gear and then you start rocking it and everyone, tries to win.
Yeah. So I just want to iterate there that that's part of the CRAP method, right? So I had you do something very concrete, and then we had discussion where all the questions came up, and that's representation because your brain is starting to piece it together. And then I shared about blockchain and how things worked and the algorithm piece, and then we could have gone through another round, which is the practice.
Yeah, we did. That's when we started talking and chatting about it. So so when somebody buys your game, when it's readily available and whatever, is that going to be built into it too? I forgot to ask you that. If Yeah, so there is going to be like an instructor manual, and after certain rounds, if somebody has questions, or even if there aren't any questions, you throw out a little learning nugget to see if people actually got what they were supposed to get at that particular round, and then you keep going, or how does that work?
Yeah, so because it's an educational game, and because I of the population that I'm targeting, which is very broad, in the education space, there is the first round is going to be that let's learn how to play this round, and then some discussion, and I'll have some talking points for educators to share about like, okay, so we played the game, and now we're going to have this discussion. What did you think? What did you think you were doing over here in the ledger? How do the transactions relate? And so it helps people tie that, and then I have a glossary of terms already that they can use. And then there'll be some like learning objectives and stuff in the educator guide. I have a rough outline of the educator guide because I needed to focus on the game design first, with that in mind. But it's the whole goal is not to make everyone like a blockchain expert, right? Because you're not going to become a blockchain expert, but it's so you have some knowledge about like how does blockchain work, because then you can think about use cases, right? Because I have a bunch of different transaction cards that we use. There's everything from like NFT credentials, like diplomas, degrees. You're buying and selling NFT art, music, games. You're doing regular transactions like attending a conference or taking a class. So those are all use cases for using blockchain. So blockchain is just storage. Okay. So, I mean, it's funny when I hear people talk about like, I'm going to use blockchain because like, it's just storage. Like, what are you going to do? Like, what are you going to put on top of that? And it's like all of those physical and digital assets that you can now use blockchain to verify transactions on. So it's all about transactions.
Yeah. So let's jump back into the design aspect of it. I think I either saw it in a tweet or on LinkedIn, or maybe when you and I were chatting, you mentioned, wow, it's really hard to build a game. There's a lot more that goes into it than I thought, or, whatnot. And I think that's the part that I'd really like people to really understand, like going through that process. Because I think a lot of people think, oh, it's easy to build a game. I know how to play games. I know how to build games, right? How did that whole process feel and look for you? Did you get lost? Did you get frustrated at times and say, it's never going to work? Like,
yeah. So, it's not the first game I've built. So I've built text-based games. So I'm an 80s kid, right? So I was born in the 70s. I'm an 80s kid. We played text-based games. And so I decided one day after Ready Player One came out, I was like, okay, remember Zork? And I remember like digging that game. I was like, I'm going to try creating a game called Trapped in Hotel California, because I love the song Hotel California by the Eagles. And I was like, it's the perfect storyline. I don't have to create the story. I just have to create a game based on it. And so I created Trapped in Hotel California. That took me like 2 months to create, because that was a lot of mechanics of like what happens, because it's a choose your own adventure. Building a tabletop game is completely different. It is a beast of a whole different nature. So I have taken some game design courses. I've consulted with game designers. I've, talked to people who have created games. And because this is unique also, and there's additional components I want to add to it. There's a bunch of different rules for designing games. Like you have to think about things like, what are your game components? How does someone win? What's the feel of the game? What are the different pieces you're going to use? Your players, what type of role are they taking in the game? There's just so much to it, right? It's more like when you think about game design and gamification, they're very different. Because gamification, you're learning objectives and whatever you created to learn, and you're going to put it into like a Jeopardy game, or you're going to create like a puzzle, or you're going to, you're not worried about the game mechanics or the feel of the game, because you're more focused on the learning part of it. With game design, you have to focus on that whole player feel, right? How does it, because if your players don't relate to your game and don't feel your gameplay, they're not gonna play it. It's not gonna get promoted. And so you have, they're very distinct things that you need to really consider in game design. And I have worked, like, my library is full of like game design books. I wish I had brought some over. I looked at a bunch of different games. So if you notice on the game board I just shared, like, some of the transactions are like pay 2 coins to the player on the left, pay to the players on the right. That's based on one of my favorite games, which is Pirinola. It's a Spanish game that's played with a top, and we used to play it with pennies. I have a Pirinola somewhere in here, but I'm going to show you what one looks like. Let me dig it up really quick. So let me share my screen so I can show you guys. So I just took some concepts, right? Like I took the concept of Pirinola and I took the concept of a regular card game. And then I had to incorporate the whole, like, a ledger piece for blockchain. So this is Pirinola, and Pirinola is just a top, and you can play with coins, or you can play with, like I said, we used to play with pennies and quarters. Just because it's fun, but you roll, you kind of twist the top, and it'll tell you, like, take 2, pay 2. So it's a really fun game. It's easy for kids to learn. But I took that concept and the card game concept and tied a bunch of mechanics together of already established games. And not trying to make up my own mechanics, right?
Yeah. Well, that was part of what I was thinking was, you've got this, I don't know, thing that you're trying to incorporate into a game, and you've got this whole, spectrum of existing games that people, have already hashed out, and you're kind of aligning things that make sense. Oh, could work this way. Oh, we could go that way. Did you think about something more like a board game at all? Like I'm going to, like a Monopoly kind of a thing. Did you think in that direction at all?
I did. So I was actually thinking Yahtzee.
Okay.
Because, Yahtzee uses a ledger, where you track, things. So I was like, how do I add that in there, right? And so I see a good question in here about, like, I'm intrigued by the concept of asking, what's the game story? So in this the story for this game is you're in the blockchain, right? And you're going to be mining the blockchain, and you have to be the fastest miner. So there's a whole storyline behind that to help people understand what blockchain mining is and stuff. So it's just, I do think about those things, right? Mm-hmm. Like I have a lot of those things that are going to be in the educator guide to help educators kind of like use this.
You should, just a little side note here, you should pair up with Kevin Thorne and have him draw some characters for you and some artwork and whatnot. Because all of a sudden now I'm thinking, when I think story and when I think you're in the blockchain, when you say it like that, I'm thinking to myself, there's these little digital characters, like they're the people inside the computer running around building the hashtags, for you, and you're one of these little digital gnomes inside the computer building the hashtag.
Yeah. So, and I'm gonna also, I'm asking Carl Kopp. I reached out to him very quickly, just saying, like, I would love to have your students play test, because he's created games. So I'm gonna be hopefully play testing with his students also. Last night was the first play test. So if you guys don't know this, when you play test, you don't play test once with one group. You have to play test many times with many groups so you can get feedback. And that's how you improve kind of like your game mechanics. And again, I made it digital because, we're all virtual right now. Mm-hmm. And so even though it's going to be a printed game, a tabletop game, the only way to actually be able to play test it without me flying out to everyone is to, use something like Mural, which is an interactive whiteboard. And I had to figure out, like, how do I make a card game in Mural? And how do I make all these moving components? And how do I tie in the ledger? And so it's really interesting. Like,
it was amazing how much work you put into building that stuff, like the spreadsheet and The mural, how you set it all up, I think is fantastic. You can see that you put a lot of thought into the design and how all those moving pieces go together.
We were talking in the green room then about the importance of instructions and the critical role that they play in this kind of a thing. So let's go in that direction then. I mean, your playtesting is obviously going to reveal places where people didn't get it and therefore need some extra help. That's going to help you flesh out the instructions. That kind of an approach, I'm sure.
So I'm going to share my screen again. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see this. I'm going to minimize this screen. Okay, so these are the instructions for the game, and it is 4 or 5 pages, but your instructions have to be detailed enough where you can hand the game off to like a group and have them play without you being in the room. So that's the whole point of instructions, is you need to be so detailed that someone can just pick it up and play. So you have to have descriptions, you have to have information like how do you win? You have to have like, what are your game components, right? Like what are the things that should be in the box or in the digital game? And then the setup, because it is a game played with multiple people, what's the setup for it? So you can at least get every player set up, and then how to play. So I have these instructions in Evernote. I just printed it out into a PDF for the game last night. But it's like, how are the rounds played? So this one starts off with transactions, and the player with the lowest wallet address plays first. We just have the first player be player 1. Everyone got to choose their own wallet. And then it just has instructions like what happens if the player has no coins to pay for a transaction? What happens if they don't have, tokens or NFT cards to continue playing? What happens if they pull a specific card? What happens? So you have to like think of like this what if. You always have to be asking what if when you're playing, writing out your instructions. And then highlighting what are the important things, like every player has to record the transaction in the mining sheet. And then there's instructions on mining. And so there's a lot of detail in here, because then in mining, there's specific things that you have to do. And so breaking this down, like I have the glossary of terms here, because there's things like gas fees, and we talk about hashing and decentralized and blocks and blockchain and addresses and minting and mining and nodes and NFTs and nonsense. So there's a lot that goes into it. And so being able to write out those details is really important, right?
So we only played one part of the game then, and you kind of talked us through some of that stuff, like the gas price and some of those other elements. Are those part of the instruction that the instructor then throws into it, kind of the way you did talking with us, or does that show up in the game that we just, as a part of the game that we just didn't get to?
Yeah, it shows up in the game of the transaction cards. So you'll have transaction cards that are like, pay a gas fee. Mint an NFT, pay a gas fee. So then you get the association that when you mint an NFT, so that means like put an NFT up for sale, you have to pay a gas fee.
It's kind of like Chutes and Ladders, NFT. Where you actually you go back.
You've mentioned a couple of times crap. And I'm familiar with crap from the graphic design world, the idea of contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. But you're using you've got a different crap phrasing going on.
I do.
Myra's all about
tell us more
crap.
about Myra. Tell us about the crap.
I'm going to tell you about my crap. So it is concrete, which means I'm going to give you something tangible to do. Right. And I'm going to give you minimal instructions. So in this case, it would be giving you game instructions, giving you the game, having you play. And then we're going to do representation, which is the R. Representation, it can be different forms. Like you can have someone diagram out what they did, or you can have discussion to talk about like, what was it that you did, right? To help people tether the concepts together and help them interpret it in their own mind. And then abstraction. Abstraction is where I tell you about like, the blockchain, like what is it, and how do all those pieces tie together? So then it helps you kind of solidify that mental model and fix any misconceptions you had in your brain already, because you've already played it. So you know conceptually what it is, right? And you kind of have this interpretation of it. And now I'm going to give you like the information on it, and then practice, which means we go back and we play again with this new knowledge that you have.
Very cool.
Oh, you beat me to it, Chris.
I know. Well, see, the thing is, I caught them all earlier on, except I was short of the A. I couldn't remember. I didn't catch what the A was. So I had pre-typed there, Brent. I was just waiting for the A to get filled in before I could push the button on it. So anyway.
Well, I'm just glad we got it in there so everybody can see what it is. I like that. I think it fits perfectly. We when we were going through the game last night, shoot, I had a point and it just escaped me. Quick, Chris, ask a question. It'll come back to me.
I know that last night you were like, I need time to read these instructions. I may be slower. Where's the ledger, Myra? Where's
Yeah, I was full of questions.
But that was really helpful to me that you were so vocal, because then we had, like when Brian Washburn was like, he yelled hash, and we're like, oh, he solved all the transactions. We all stopped and we verified. And Destry was like, he has the wrong last 3 digits of the hashes. He didn't solve it, right? So like the level of competition was amazing, but it also brought out like these whole mechanics of like the consensus method works, right? And so in blockchain, everything's about consensus, because everyone has to have the same information in their ledger, because that's how you verify information. And so the fact that we were able to go back and verify and say, Brian's hashes are wrong, and then everyone kept on trying to solve the puzzles, which is really cool to see happen, right? Because then it got really uber competitive.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I remembered what I was going to say. So I think, and I mentioned this last night. One of the things that I thought was really cool about it was the idea of starting at that really low level of what a hash is, the nonce, how that whole thing gets built, and why. Because that led to the conversation about the YouTube stuff. Because when you go out and you learn about blockchain and whatever, they abstract the whole thing up so many different levels. And then they may or may not even mention a hash or a code or everything has a unique number. And then they just kind of leave it at that. I love the idea of kind of making people scratch their head and looking at that and going, well, this isn't like this. You're starting deep at what it is. And then you start having them, dig their way out and then build up to, and then how do we use it, right? This is what it is. Mm-hmm. This is how it goes. And then we use it, as opposed to the other way around. Hey, here's the big picture, everybody. Because this is typically how we do instructional design stuff, right? Give them the big picture, show them the whole ball of wax, and then start diving down into particular little, detailed aspects of it. So I think this is cool because it forces the game players to generate those questions and start asking a lot. And then when that instructor intervenes, maybe not intervenes, but then says, here's why this happens, or here's what happens when this happens. And it answers their questions, or that they have the opportunity to ask one of the questions or whatnot. Yeah, I think I like that approach.
Yeah, and I think one of the other interesting takeaways for me from this first gameplay was around when we did the mining round. And, it's fairly simple. You're just copying numbers over and you're decoding letters into numbers, right? And then you're creating that hash. And for Destry, it was cool because Destry is like, he gets all excited about, blockchain and stuff like that. But for him, this was like an aha moment. And I could see his face just kind of like light up when he figured out that a hash is a set of information, right? So we have some alphanumeric information, like the transaction name, and the nodes have letters and numbers, but computers only understand numbers, so that's why you have to decode letters into numbers, so then the computer can read it and create a hash. And we don't use 0 in there. I only used 1 through 9 purposely, because computer language is ones and zeros, and so the computer will take those long numbers and turn them into ones and zeros, which is just basically on or off. Like that's that's what it comes down to. Computer language is like binary. It's just like 1 is on, 0 is off. Do you know what I mean? Like that's it. But to be able to, a computer be able to complete 1,000 transactions or more in a second, and just having you guys understand that when people are mining Bitcoin, they are making money, but they're also using a lot of energy because they have to have these high-powered computers that use a lot of energy, and that's why you hear about Bitcoin not being green and stuff. So.
Oh, that's a whole nother podcast. We won't get into that today.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is that if this is a card game, it's not going to use any electricity when people actually play it. So I also like the idea that we're taking something out of its context, right? You could have made a computer game to do this, but the introduction of cards and the physicality of it, just it brings another element to that. And when you were talking about people playing the game first and then kind of solving some of the problems as part of the process, a comparison that came to mind was like when Penn and Teller do a stunt or a trick, and you go, oh my God, that was amazing, and then they lift the curtains and you go, that's how they did it, or that's how it works, and you're still even more amazed by that whole kind of process. It's a fascinating, throw people into the deep end in a sense with its comfort, right? Like they're not really at risk. It's not like they're actually trying to do this with money or anything, but they're thrown into something that gives them a sense of, there's a sense of risk or a sense of something, and they've got it moves some of the motivation then into intrinsic motivation too, right? Like, oh, this didn't work for me. Why? As opposed to being simply told a set of rules and thou shalt do this and thou shalt do that if this occurs too. So there's a lot of neat psychology stuff going on in this kind of an approach.
Yeah, and so what's interesting is like the introduction of coins in the game. So everyone starts off with the same amount of coins, but you have to pay coins left or right, or collect coins, right? Or pay coins to a network. And so that's painful for people, even when you're just doing paper coins or little digital coins that aren't even tied to any money, like any actual money. It's just coins, right? But it gives you kind of this feeling of like, I'm losing my little pot of money. Like, what happens if I'm broke, right? So it does bring, and so it was cool to see that emotion being brought in too, because then it means that my game feel is going where I want it to go, right? Like you're feeling like you have investment in this, in this blockchain with these transactions, and that you want to earn more money, because that's the whole point. The winner is the person who has the most NFTs and coins and the most, and has the most value. So
at the end of the day,
very cool.
What's next for the project as we get close to wrapping up time here?
Yep. So I need to do some more play testing. ATD-TK is in January. We're going to be playing around of the games for people who are attending ATD-TK. You'll have an opportunity to play with me. That's going to be super interesting. So I need to wrap my head around how I'm going to do that one, because that's not 5 people. That's usually a bunch of people who also want to play. So I'm figuring out like my master plan for that. I'm going to continue play testing, and then I'm going to print a physical prototype of the game, and we're going to play it at ATD Ice. So working on that also. So if you're going to go to Ice, you'll get to play the physical game with me. Trying to get Carl Kopp and Brittany Cole to bring their games also, so we can have like a learning game night cool. At ATD Ice. Yeah, so that'll be fun. And then eventually the game will get printed and be offered for sale. And with every purchase of the game, the purchaser will also receive an NFT certificate. So the game will be backed by blockchain. So you get a digital, a physical asset that has a digital certificate that's backed on the blockchain.
I was wondering if you were going to do that, if you were going to sell it, like it's going to cost you a Bitcoin to buy this game, or but yeah, I like the certificate being on the blockchain better. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and so you'll be able to pay with some type of crypto or with cash. So
let's tell everybody how they can stay in touch with you to stay connected to this process. We'll definitely have you back as like when you launch or something like that. It'll be fun. Maybe we'll do a launch party here on Idiotic for you. How about that?
Oh, that'll be fun.
Very cool.
I just put my LinkedIn in the chat. I hope you guys drop your LinkedIn into the chat also. I will continue posting my progress on LinkedIn also. I'm also on TikTok, which is where I post most of my nonsense nowadays. TikTok and Instagram.
You have fantastic nonsense, by the way. I appreciate your TikTok. I'm not much of a TikToker, but I'm on there watching my kids' goofiness, and I recently saw that you were on it too. So it's definitely a good place to go for sure.
Yeah,
for some
definitely.
fun stuff. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not turning up my sound here. There we go. Now it's time for us to call it a day.
Time to dance away. Myra, thanks so much. This is brilliant. Absolutely so much fun. And we're looking forward to seeing how it progresses and maybe getting to play along with you at some point in time more. So thanks so much for bringing it to us today. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I hope everyone has a great day.
Yeah, and thanks to everybody as always in the chat. Lots of smart stuff happening over there too as we were chatting, and lots of good back and forth there too. So thanks everybody for joining us again, and we will see you next week, which will be our last one of the year before we take time off for the holiday season until the new year. But join if you're currently still in Crowdcast with us. Make sure you sign up for that. And Brent tossed in, we've got the LinkedIn group where we post a lot of follow-up related stuff in there. So if you haven't yet joined the LinkedIn group for Idiotic, do that today. Don't wait. Act now. But wait, there's more. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll catch you next week. In the meantime,
everybody have a great Thanksgiving and all that kind of good stuff. And not Thanksgiving, we already did that. Never mind.
Thanksgiving.
Christmas,
Brent. Yes, that's what's coming up.
Brent's going back in time here somehow.
Holidays.
I know he is.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
We're out of here.
We'll catch everybody.
Bye,
next
everyone.
time. Thanks, Dan.
Big finish.